The sky above the island turns the color of deep red. Thick smoke climbs high and hides the sun. Stone buildings break and fall. Wooden roofs crash down with a sound like far-off thunder. In the middle of the fire and noise stands a tall woman on a war chariot. Her long red hair flies behind her like a flag in the wind. A heavy band of gold shines around her neck. Behind her wait tens of thousands of fighters. She is not a Roman leader. She is not a man of power from the big cities across the sea. She is a queen from a small tribe the Romans called Wild. They tried to break her. Instead, she set 3 of their towns on fire. Her name is Boudica. Almost 2,000 years later, the black ash from her anger still lies under the streets of modern towns. Long before that day of fire, the Romans came. In the year 43, the Emperor Claudius sent 40,000 soldiers across the short sea from the land that is now France. The island they reached was cold and wet and covered with thick woods. The Romans named it Britannia. It was not one country. It was many small tribes of Celtic people. Each tribe had its own king and its own land and its own fighters. These people painted their faces blue. They rode light chariots into battle. They fought hard and feared little, but they often fought each other too. That made them weak against a big army. The Roman soldiers moved fast. They beat the southern tribes one by one. Some tribes fought and lost everything. Others chose to make peace. They kept their land and their titles if they paid taxes and stayed loyal. One of those tribes was the Iceni. They lived in the flat green fields of the east that reached toward the cold North Sea. Their king was Prasutagus. He was a careful man. He saw that the Roman army was the strongest fighting force anyone knew. Their soldiers trained every day. They carried strong shields and short, sharp swords. They moved like one body. Fighting them alone would mean death for his people. So, Prasutagus made a deal. He would rule as a friend of Rome. He would pay what they asked. In return, Rome would leave his people alone. For almost 20 years the deal worked. Prasutagus led his tribe. He paid the taxes. Peace held. Beside him stood his wife. The Roman writers who told her story many years later were Tacitus and Cassius Dio. Both were Romans writing about an enemy long after the events. Still, they remembered her clearly. They said she was tall. Her face looked strong and fierce. Her voice was rough and full of power. Her hair was a thick mass of red that fell past her waist. Around her neck she wore a heavy twisted band of gold. Celtic leaders wore these bands to show rank. She also wore a bright cloak fixed with a pin. Even her enemies could not forget the sight of her. Boudica and Prasutagus had 2 daughters. No one wrote down their names. No one wrote what they looked like or what dreams they held. History only kept what happened to them later. Around the year 60, King Prasutagus died. Even in death he tried to protect his family. His will said half the kingdom would go to the Roman emperor. The other half would stay with his 2 daughters. He hoped this share would keep Rome happy and let his wife and children live in peace on their part of the land. The Romans did not keep the deal. When the Roman money officers came, they took everything. The whole Iceni land now belonged to Rome, they said. The farms, the houses, the gold, all of it. The noble families lost their estates. They were treated like servants. When Boudica spoke against this, the soldiers seized her. They beat her in public with leather straps in front of her own people. Her 2 daughters were hurt by the soldiers in a way the old books record with clear horror. Boudica had to watch. The Romans thought this show of power would end any thought of fight. They had done the same in other places and it had worked. They did not know this queen. What came next was sudden and huge. Boudica did not cry and give up. She did not run. She called her people to war. Not only the Iceni came. Neighbor tribes who had also suffered under Roman rule joined her. The Trinovantes were a large, strong tribe. The Romans had taken their old sacred town and turned it into a place for old soldiers to live. They rose with her. Smaller tribes followed. In a short time, Boudica led a force the old writers said reached 100,000. Men and women, young and old, carried swords and spears. They carried years of anger that had grown since the Romans first arrived. Their first target was the town the Romans called Camulodunum. Today, it is Colchester. It was the main Roman place in the south. A big temple stood there for the dead Emperor Claudius. Old soldiers and their families lived there. The town had no strong walls. No full army stood nearby. The people felt safe. They thought the local tribes would never dare rise. Boudica's force swept through the streets like a great wind. The town burned from end to end. Every building, every temple, every house fell to the flames. The big temple was the last to go. The people inside held the doors for 2 days. Then the fire took them too. Under the ground of modern Colchester, diggers still find a thick black layer. Ash, melted glass, black pots mark the exact time of that fire. Almost 2,000 years later, the proof still waits in the earth. A Roman force from the 9th Legion, about 2,000 foot soldiers, marched to stop the rising. Boudica's warriors met them on the road and cut them down. Only the horse leader and a few riders got away. A full Roman legion, one of the most feared groups in the world, was gone. The woman the Romans had beaten in public had done this only weeks later. Next, Boudica turned toward Londinium. That was the young trading town on the river that would one day grow into London. At that time, it was only about 20 years old. Maybe 30,000 people lived there. Merchants, warehouses, docks, and busy shops filled the place. When word came that the great force was coming, fear ran through the streets. The Roman governor of the whole island, Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, was far away in the west. He was on the island of Anglesey fighting the Druid priests. When the news reached him, he rode hard with his horse soldiers and got to the town before his main army. He looked at the place. He looked at the small number of men with him. He made a hard choice. The town could not be saved. He ordered his men to leave and find better ground for a real fight. He said anyone who could keep up with the march could come. The old, the sick, the children, and many women stayed behind. The Roman writer Tacitus told this moment with rare feeling. The people begged to be taken. Suetonius turned and left. Boudica reached the town and burned it the same way. Under modern London, diggers find another layer of red ash. They call it the Boudica destruction layer. A line of fire kept in the ground for 20 centuries. Everything above it is later Roman building. Everything below it is the town she destroyed. From there, her force moved north to the third big Roman town, Verulamium, known today as St. Albans. She burned that too. 3 towns gone. The Roman writer Tacitus said about 70,000 people died in the 3 attacks. The number may be high or low, but the size of the loss was clear. For a short time it looked as if Boudica might push the Romans off the island for good. Suetonius picked his place with care. Somewhere in the middle of the island, the exact spot is still argued over. He set his army in a narrow space. Thick woods guarded his back. Steep sides protected the left and right. The tight ground meant Boudica's large numbers could not spread out and close around him. They would have to come straight at the front of his lines. He had maybe 10,000 trained soldiers. She had many more. But he had the one thing her force lacked: Roman order. The last fight was a hard and one-sided killing. Boudica's warriors ran across the open land in a great wave. They shouted and pushed forward with all the anger they carried. The Romans stood firm. They did not break. When the Britons came close enough, the soldiers threw their heavy spears. The iron tips went through wooden shields and stuck them to the ground or to the men behind. Then the Romans pulled their short swords and moved forward in a tight-pointed shape. They stepped and stabbed in steady rhythm like a machine that did not stop. The Britons could not break that wall of shields and blades. They began to fall back. Behind them stood the wagons that had followed the army. Hundreds of wagons held the families, the food, the children. They formed a wide half-circle at the rear. There was no way out. The Roman line pushed into the crowded space. The killing was terrible. Boudica lived through the battle. What came next is not clear. Tacitus wrote that she took poison so the Romans would not take her alive. Cassius Dio wrote that she grew sick and died soon after. No one knows where she was laid in the ground. No grave has been found. The queen who burned 3 Roman towns disappeared from the written story as fast as she had entered it. Rome rebuilt. Londinium rose again from the ash, larger and stronger. This time the Romans gave it thick stone walls that would last 1,000 years. The town grew into the main center of Roman Britain. Many centuries later it became the heart of a new empire that reached farther than Rome ever had. The black and red layers of ash stayed sealed under the new streets. They waited until modern diggers went down through 20 centuries of earth and found the line of fire still there. Boudica herself was not lost to memory. Long after the Romans left the island, people looked for symbols of courage. They found her again. In the time of Queen Victoria, a bronze statue of Boudica was set beside the river Thames near the Houses of Government. It shows a tall woman on a chariot. Her arms are raised. Her daughters stand with her. She charges toward an enemy only she can see. The statue still stands today in the same city she once burned. The queen who tried to destroy the place now watches over it. The Roman Empire is gone. Its emperors are dust. Its legions are silent. Yet the name of the Iceni queen is still spoken. She was beaten and shamed. She watched the worst harm come to her children. She did not break. She did not bow. She stood up and raised an army and shook the strongest power of her age. She lost the final fight. Roman order and training proved stronger than numbers and rage. Her fire could burn towns, but it could not burn the empire itself. Still think of this. 2,000 years have passed. The empire that tried to erase her is only a memory. Her statue stands in the heart of the city she once set alight. Sometimes winning is not the only way to be remembered. Sometimes the simple act of standing when every force tells you to kneel is the real victory. The ash still lies under the streets. The bronze figure still faces the river. The story still asks the same quiet question. When power tries to break a person, what does it mean to refuse? Boudica answered with fire across 3 towns. Did history judge her in a fair way? What can her choice still teach us now?